All right, let's go ahead and talk about drum processing today. First thing we want to talk about in drum processing is sample selection. It's really important to have good sounding samples. If it's going to sound like shit coming in, it's going to sound like shit going out. You can polish a turd, but it doesn't make it not a turd. So this sample is from the Cashmere pack. I like it a lot. Let's go ahead and listen to it. The Cashmere pack's pretty good. If you get the opportunity to download that, go ahead and do that. So you got pretty much two parts of a drum. You got your transient part, which is this first initial part, and your second part, which is your sustain. If you have a much quicker, busier mix, what I suggest you doing is trying to cut back on your sustain and adding a little bit of fade after the transient. That'll make it be less muddy in the mix. So it's going to help you out a lot if you're mixing with some quicker music, especially if you have metal kind of kicks and whatnot where it's pretty rapid, or kick builds and whatnot. It can really help that. Or long sustaining bass, just having the transient in there can really help it. If you have longer, more breathable music, having a longer sustain can help. Fill in some space, especially if you have pretty choppy, pretty quick bass notes. So let's talk about compression in drum processing on the kick. Compression will make or break you. So what's going to happen here is we're going to go ahead and try out a couple different compressors with same ratios, same thresholds. We're just going to beat the crap out of them on this compressor to really show you what we're doing. So the first one, we have a really short attack and a long release. The next one, we have a little bit longer of an attack and a little bit shorter release. And the third one, a really long attack and really short release. And let's just hear what they kind of happen. So as you can kind of hear there, really short attack or long release really kills the drum. Really not what we're looking for. Let's go with a little bit medium. So as you can hear, that transient's still coming through just a little bit. And I'm not using any makeup gain here on purpose, just to give you guys a really, just to show you guys what's really happening, especially with that transient when you're going through a compressor. Obviously, this stuff would sound a little bit different if I actually made it up properly, but we're not going to do that here, so I'll go back through and show you that here in a minute. And lastly, long attack, short release. So this one really kills the sustain on it, but really pushes that transient up in the front. For those of you that don't know, makeup is what's called makeup gain. So as you're going through your compressor, it's going to bring up the level back to match it. Okay, now next we're going to do a glue compressor that's properly made up and properly done. So that first little bit was just to kind of try to show you what it would sound like in different settings. My preference is a slow attack and a long release, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it allows the transient to actually go through. So this part right here actually comes through the compressor before it actually bites down. Secondly, the short release gives you a lot of tone on it. And thirdly, there's a psychoacoustic principle where when your ears hear something loud, they take a second and clamp down. And what this compressor is doing is that it's mimicking how your ears will tighten up with a loud sound. It's a protective evolutionary trait that our human ears have, and by doing this, you can actually mimic that to an extent. Obviously, it's not doing it perfectly because you're not actually sending a signal to your ears to clamp down, but this is similar to that. So we're going to go with how I usually go ahead and process my kicks, which is with a glue compressor. I just like this compressor better than some of the other ones. There are plenty of great aftermarket VST compressors, but for an Ableton native compressor, this one has a lot of good tone, and I really like it a lot. So let's go ahead and listen to this. So I usually put soft clip on there just in case it does clip. Often drums will clip, so it just kind of helps keep it from hard clipping. So basically what's happening is instead of hitting a brick wall and just getting sliced off, it kind of rounds the edges on both sides of the clip so that it's not as abrasive. That helps a lot. So I usually have a short release, and you can really dictate your tone of the drum with this release. You get a lot more grit and bite out of it if you have your short release. A longer attack allows you to bring more transients through. Generally, the lower the drum, the longer the attack I have. And then I usually have 3 to 4 dB of gain reduction and 3 to 4 dB of makeup. And I'll play with this dry wet. Usually it's somewhere about 50-50 to give you a nice best of both worlds, where you're not taking too much, you're not compressing too much, and you're allowing it. Next, big thing is EQ. So I personally like getting my kicks to sound like basketballs, but that's just me. I like that nice punchy kick, not too much of a top end, but enough to be clear in a mix. I'm not a big fan of the metal kicks where it's pretty much this. Super fast, which works really great if you're doing really fast-paced music, especially like metal or any sort of fast-paced EDM, like maybe techno or whatnot, could use a little bit more high-end in their kick. That allows you to really latch onto it, especially when it's very quick, because when you repeat kicks a lot very quickly, it can become mud. We'll just do that real quick, just for showing purposes. So, as you can see, the higher on that can really help it out. The big debate here is EQ before or after compression. Well, it really doesn't fucking matter. It's how you're going to do it and what you're going to do with it. If you're trying to compress certain frequencies more than others, throw it before. That works, because now these frequencies are going to be louder than these other ones. It's just slightly different. It's what you want to do. It has no right or wrong reason. There's no right or wrong in music production. It's really what you're looking for. It's what you want to do in your track. Personally, I'll do both. Depends on what I'm trying to do. But usually I'll put my main EQ after. And the main reason I do this is because I mix as a live sound engineer as well. And most boards that I have, it's gate, compressor, EQ. I'm more familiar with that channel strip than the other way around. So that's why I go at that way. And if you're mixing live drums, here's a big thing that you want to keep in mind is your gate as well. Let me go ahead and get that in here. So what your gate does is your gate's going to cut off stuff that's not in there. Now this is really useful, especially if you have a live mic'd kick or live mic drums at all. You can really keep stuff from getting out of hand with this, and I'll show you this later when we get to the hi-hats. But when you're just using samples, this is a pretty decent way to just cut off the back end or control your kicks or your snares on your back end to make them a little shorter. But in my opinion, if you're going to do that, it's just easier to do this and slice it off like that. That is my opinion. I know other people don't do that as much. It depends on what you're doing. If you're using live music, definitely use a gate. It really helps keep stuff clean. Now let's talk about another pretty cool function of compressors and gates in here while we're at it. It's look ahead. So what this look ahead does is this allows this whole track to be, the audio of this track to be delayed so that the computer can actually go through and go, oh, here's going to be where the transient is 10 milliseconds before it actually hits. Now, if you're going to do this, what this does is this delays the audio of this track. So what you got to do here is come in here and go -10, milliseconds to make up for that. So this delays every other track to this track. So now this track is delayed 10 milliseconds because of this look ahead right here. And then now this track, now every other track is delayed 10 milliseconds because of this track. We're going to go ahead and undo that real quick. But that's a little nugget of audio stuff to use. So that's pretty much basically your basic drum processing. Now, how I usually EQ, especially on a kick, is I'll find where I want the fundamental. You have a fundamental down here, but you have your punch, and usually that's between 90 and 60. So I'll find somewhere in there and kind of boost it. Maybe take a high shelf and boost the low end. And what I'll also do is cut out some of this mid area. Not too much around, between 1 and 200, because you'll still get a lot of roundness of the kick. If you go too much, it just doesn't sound right. Go and turn that one off. But if you don't cut this area, this area is a lot of fundamentals for other instruments, vocals. Your snares will sit right here around 200 to 300 generally. A lot of toms and other stuff will sit right here. That if you have this general area 2 to 800 in here, you're going to be just masking stuff when you have your kick come in, and it's just not necessary to make a kick sound like a kick. Now I'll also have a boost up here somewhere between, usually I have it between a K and 3K. Depends on the kick, depends on the song. But all you have it usually sit somewhere right around here. And that's going to be the stuff that your ear's catching rather than what you're going to feel in your chest when that hits. So this is for your ears up here. I usually take a high shelf down just a little bit, still leaving it in, but not too much. That's just how I like to process my kicks. I like them sounding like basketballs more than other things. So that's how I process kicks.